Hi,
Hey,
everybody. Oh, look. Hi. Welcome to the IC topic chat for today.
happy
It's the
happy.
October 16th, 2025. We're really pleased. Annually, we like to have the TIG leadership. Once upon a time, I was a TIG leader. In fact, it was one of my clients' sons who created the graphic that you're seeing right here. That is a guinea pig wearing armor or a helmet. And there was a early survey done in the early 2010s by Amy Gramuth, also a former IC TIG leader, and she did this wonderful presentation. And her big conclusion at the end was that independent consultants were like guinea pigs in armor, and she had a picture of it, and that was kind of our little mascot for a while there. And then when I had some extra funds from a lunch or a dinner, it was a dinner we had one year, I think in 2015. I said, well, why don't we use the extra funds to get some graphics and some tablecloths and stuff like that? And so, hence, the TIG pig was born. That's what I call it. I don't know if anybody has a nickname for it, but I like to call it Icky because I think that's funny. Anyway, with that, Naima and Nathan are here. Naima's our current TIG chair, and Nathan's our TIG chair elect. And so it's really exciting to hear what's going on with the TIG, where we're going. And I'm sure if you're interested, they're going to be interested in talking to you about getting more involved with TIG leadership. So I'm going to be quiet and pass it off to you guys. Welcome.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, everybody. Hello, my name is Naaima, and as Matt mentioned, I'm the current chair of the IC-TIG. I am super excited for today's conversation about IC-TIG leadership. And Nathan, would you like to say a quick piece about yourself?
Sure. Nathan Browning here. Longtime fan of the IC Topic Chats. So glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you. And I think as we go through this, folks will recognize that it's a really big community endeavor, really. IC-TIG leadership, I think it's really obvious for folks perhaps who have been part of our community for any amount of meaningful time that we have a very supportive and interconnected community. And we joke often about being interdependent consultants. And I think that's really true. And we found a lot of value in supporting one another in these types of spaces. So that is going to be a big piece. But a lot of what was this year, I think 2025 TIG leadership had a distinct flavor for many different reasons. And among the most obvious being that we are really responding to and continue to respond to work and field disruptions, right? So we know at the federal level, there have been several policy changes. We also know that there have been just changes in economic circumstances and situations for evaluation consultants more broadly. And so we, in the early part of the year, really found ourselves in a little bit of a tailspin trying to figure out how to respond and how to hold space, because I think in that moment when everything became uncertain, TIG membership was really trying to find a space to connect and process things. And I think that continues to be so much of what our challenges as we go throughout these times, albeit it has slowed down a little bit as we've seen through some of the open spaces we've designed. But we've also in the context of that have launched the Masterminds program, which the IC-TIG board typically does. We do a process of matching through which folks who are interested in finding peer support for their small businesses or larger businesses can get together and workshop through challenges that they face together, as well as the bi-monthly newsletter that our TIG puts out. This year it was bi-monthly because all of the capacity kind of saturation, let's just say, that folks had going on with information. And so we figured that as a TIG board, we would contribute to the great adage that less is sometimes more. And so we decided to slow down our cadence of communication and have been relatively consistent with bi-monthly newsletters. And then we also worked on liaising with the AEA board primarily via the International Working Group, who had reached out to us early, along with a couple of other TIGs, where they decided to launch a survey of all the the folks in the field and trying to figure out what the impact of all of these policy changes and these federal cuts and other, DEI kind of related policy changes were. And Nathan's going to talk a little bit more about what we found as a result of that. And then we also assessed the needs of independent consultants in our own survey as well, even though we were overrepresented as part of the broader survey with the board. And then we had conversations with board members, really kind of reflecting what we heard our members saying to us were the needs. So that was a really critical function of the board, again, this year, pretty early on. And as a result of a lot of those findings, we worked on being responsive to what the key findings were, which included just people, having this desire to have more space to connect and be in community with one another. So we designed a bunch of open spaces that the TIG board led throughout the year. I believe we had 4, if I'm not mistaken, in total, 3 or 4, I can't remember off the top of my head. And we were able to have at least a few folks join and really get some of the things that were on people's minds and perhaps some of the more technical, questions that folks had about either starting their own independent consultancies or, operating in the midst of turmoil, right? We were able to address some of those topics together in these open spaces. And then we also have an offering, which I had started up, gosh, I was looking back and I was like, it's already been more than a year, with Business as Unusual. And so this was really to help us center equity as practitioners in the field and understand kind of the challenges that come along with that and how to work through some of those. As many of us know, that space is being figured out right now. We have a little, glitch and trying to figure out what it means to kind of meaningfully conduct a learning space where folks have to be vulnerable with people filtering in and out. So have some proposed solutions coming up for that. But then also we engaged with cross-TIG coordination. So this actually came from a lot of the early work in understanding how different TIGs were impacted by all these changes. And so there was a call among TIG leaders from other TIGs to get together and share information and resources. So we also set up a monthly cross-TIG leadership team, which this is somewhat behind the scenes, but is work that is clearly happening, and our TIGs are trying to figure out how to be more supportive and in more communication with one another, as evidenced by some of the initiatives coming out of that group. I think we have still a long ways to go, but it's a start. It's always a start of a good conversation. And we also, and Nathan can speak to this a little bit more because this is something he's been spearheading, is we also identified a need for having a small business retreat. So within our community, we know that there are a lot of solopreneurs and smaller shops in terms of consulting shops. And so we decided that it would be helpful to create the space for these smaller businesses to really have the opportunity to connect and network more deeply. Nathan, is there anything that you would like to add?
No, that was extremely comprehensive. We've been up to a lot this year, and I feel like it's been a very different year. I've been on the TIG leadership for, I think this is my 3rd or 4th year now, and this has been very different than the past years. We are facing new challenges and so yes, I'll speak more to that in a second.
Yeah, actually, I was going to turn it over to you. So please go ahead, Nathan.
Perfect. So, oh, can you go back one? So I know Matt likes to ask the guest speakers the question of, is it a good time to become an independent consultant? And I think always we kind of want to say yes to that question. And I would say this might be the hardest time to be an evaluator, maybe in recent memory, if not long-term memory. Our field is hurting. So Naaima pointed to the March survey that was primarily fielded by the IWG International Working Group of independent consultants and evaluators throughout all of AEA, but especially in some of the most closely related TIGs. And these are some of the results from that survey. This question was about whether income has been impacted. And again, this was back in March. So this is like very old data at this point, and there's probably a lot more to see in more recent data. just in March, there were almost 1 in 5 people on the very far right side of this bar chart that had lost all of their evaluation related income. And just to put, I mean, just putting that in perspective, and again, this is not like a super representative survey. This is not super systematic and rigorous, um, but there is a lot of hurt, and there was a lot of people expecting more hurt in the future. Um, so something, I mean, something to the effect of 3 out of 4 evaluators are expecting loss of income. Um, just the stakes of which we are kind of going through. And of course, like you might see your own experience in this data, you might not. Um, but just on a broad sense, we are hurting as a field. And I'm sure that's not really news to any of you. But I would add that for this survey, over half of the respondents were independent consultants. So this data is actually fairly representative of the independent consulting experience as well. Now we can go to the next slide. So just to like some of the stories and quotes that come out of the survey, I have no job, now competing with thousands of others in the same horrible situation. The job in the sector has been obliterated overnight. And the attacks are threatening the role of evidence and learning in the US federal government in an existential threat sort of manner to our profession. So I'm just kind of, I mean, I know this is like very doom and gloom. Um, and I know we hear a lot of doom and gloom, but these are kind of the stakes and the context that we are operating in as a field. And so um, I just wanted to share some of these things, and again, knowing that it might be changing even more recently, and there are different challenges that are coming up all the time. But, and Naima, you were right to go to the next slide. This within this, there is been a lot of sacrifice and service toward each other, the interdependency. And this was another quote from the same survey. The amount of personal and professional risk people are willing to take is inspiring. And so I kind of want to bring you all to what we need as a field right now, are leaders, right? And their leadership comes in different forms. And the way we're going to pitch today is by being part of the IC leadership team. Um, and I would say if you really wanted to have an influence in the future of AEA, this is probably one of the better times in recent memory, because we have had more correspondence with the board, more coordination with other TIGs, with the International Working Group, than we ever have in my experience being part of the TIG leadership in the past few years. So that is essentially the sort of the call to action for you all is, if you've thought about wanting to, how can you become, a leader and start to continue to weave the interdependency that has been woven over a series of decades at this point for independent consulting. um, this is the opportunity. So Naima, do you want to take it back and talk about the leadership team?
Yeah, thank you, Nathan, for setting up that additional context. And I do think that there is an unprecedented level of trying to understand both the value add of AEA as a professional organization, but then also really understanding the structural inner workings and how membership communicates with leadership. And so, there are several opportunities to perhaps plug in and get more savvy around many of those issues if you join the board in this moment. So thanks for lifting that up. So in terms of our current leadership team, we just wanted to highlight the folks who are part of the board right now and the various positions that we serve. So that our outgoing chair is Dr. Tasha Parker, and she has been hosting pretty actively the healing spaces on a monthly basis in the ICTIG kind of community. And she, has, done, several kind of field building and contributive things. And I was excited to see that she has a workshop, professional development workshop this year at the AEA conference. Of course, myself as current board chair, I have my business called Create Good, and I'm based in Houston. We have Nathan, who is the incoming chair, who is really taking a lot on fast. So thank you, Nathan. And I know you've had a long history of leadership with the ICTIG. And so when we talk a little bit more toward the end, I'd love to explore kind of the various routes that we took to get into IC TIG leadership, because I don't think there's any one kind of right answer here, right? So that's also something that I'd like to chat a little bit about before we wrap up. And social media chair. So we have Courtney, who has been keeping us on track in terms of all the things that are going on. And she is great about sending out reminders to our TIG membership over the discussion board, as well as on social media, about all the different events that are happening, as well as, you know, where to find information. And then our newsletter chair, Ashima, who is a part of the bi-monthly process of putting together all of the content and the member features and, you know, some of the other things that go into the newsletter. And our program co-chairs, who are critical to selecting the conference sessions that our TIG presents or, you know, hosts, are include the outgoing program co-chair, who is Lily, and Kayla. So our 2026 leadership position openings are really the chair-elect, the program co-chair, who will be coming in and rotating into Lily's spot, serving along with Kayla, and then the new newsletter web media editor position and the social media position. And so these are, you know, the same positions that are open every year. We have a staggered, you know, kind of system. And as you all saw, we have that chair sandwich that I went through kind of just right now with currently Tasha, myself, and Nathan. And so when you run for the chair-elect, it's important to know that this is a 3-year commitment. And we're currently, just to be transparent, we're kind of looking at the structure and assessing to see if it still makes sense the way that it is right now. But, you know, more to come on that. But the chair-elect is really a lot more about kind of plugging in and finding kind of your niche, if you will, right? Or your interest, and really kind of being the support person for the leadership team. And then the program co-chairs really working together for, again, the session selection, the kind of follow up with AEA and communicating about sessions and proposals and communicating back to TIG membership. So that whole process. And I wish Ashima was on the call, but the newsletter and web media editor is really about, you know, gathering the content, really keeping people up to speed, and using the newsletter as a tool to help membership understand the key touch points that the TIG has with members and the key opportunities that are available to members. And then social media, of course, being the kind of the leg of the keeping people up to date and up to speed with what's going on in the now. So that was my attempt, Nathan, at position descriptions. Please do correct me or fill me in if anything is off there. But we have a nomination process that is launching very soon. So we are excited to share with you all that our nomination form is up. We have created a QR code if you would like to take a minute to scan with the code. If you are considering running for any of these positions, we encourage you to self-nominate, or if you know of a colleague or a person who would be very apt for any of the position descriptions that you heard about, please do take a minute to nominate them. And we hold a lot of openness to being in touch with folks who are curious to learn more about positions. If you want to chat through what the time commitment looks like, what the actual content of the work looks like, where any one of us are more than happy to chat with you. And Nathan will be dropping our contact information into the chat soon. Yeah, and then Nathan, I want to also turn it over to you for anything you would like to share.
Yep, yeah, I'm glad you said that. I did. It's we as you know, the IC topic chat is very active, so it is already buried, but our email addresses are in there. Please reach out to us, you know, either asynchronously chat with us via email, schedule a time to chat, talk about what the positions really look like. We have a bit of a different, I would say, usually our election process is completed earlier. This year, we're trying to work around the conference, which is a little bit, I think, later than usual this year. And so we want to kind of give that opportunity for people to come to the conference, see some of the sessions that we're hosting, maybe get to meet some of the other people, um, and kind of have that recruitment process be part of the conference. So we've pushed back the elections. Those will happen in early December. And then after we have those elections, we will make those announcements mid-December, and then we'll get started in the term starting in January. So a little bit different timeline than typical in past years, a little bit later.
Yeah, and our experience has been that it's good to plan a little bit of transition time as well, so that folks who are rolling on to the new positions can have a little bit of a time to get some institutional knowledge passed from the other positions. So we're hoping that a mid-December announcement will still leave just a little bit of time toward the end of the year there to squeeze in some of that. Yeah, Matt.
Yeah, one of the things that I know is always a position that you're recruiting for, that you have to find a new person every year, is that program chair. And I know you've went through who the current leaders are. Is there a program chair who will be in their second year next year who would be able, it's usually you learn from the previous program chair. Nathan, I know this is your route. You went within the TIG leadership. You have an opportunity to become like a co-program chair in year one. You're learning from that person who's been there, who's now in year two, and then in the second year, you're more in that kind of leadership role. Is that the current case? Because I know that's one of those things that's a great way for people to get involved, and there's usually a pretty direct path for how you do your engagement.
Yes, that is exactly right. Um, the person you'd be working with next year, if you were to decide to go want to be program co-chair, is Kayla Myers, and Kayla is fantastic. So it would be a treat to get to work with Kayla. Um, I will be the chair elect, or I'll be the chair next year, and Naaima will still be part of the board as our outgoing chair. So we have that chair sandwich as well. And the idea is really like to pass on the wisdom and kind of the changes that occur year to year and be able to handle those things kind of smoothly. Um, so it's not like we're throwing you in the deep end. You are definitely well supported, especially for those two positions. The other ones are where we have to work a little more to build in that transition time that Naima was talking about, to help pass along some of the expectations, the duties. But generally, we as a team, as a leadership team, we find ways to make sure everyone is able to do what they need to do. And we don't have, it's not like a, I don't want to say it's like a very informal process, but we're a very like collaborative group, and we pick up the slack where we need to. And um, you're also, I mean, part of being on the leadership team is you can kind of build your path, right? Like if you have certain initiatives that you want to see or want to host, that's a very frequent contribution to members or from members of the leadership team, is kind of saying, okay, I have this idea, and I want to, have this be broadly casted, and maybe this is going to be a official TIG supported type of affair, and it can even build. So the mastermind started as like a someone on the leadership team had this idea, and now it is a consistent program that we do most years. So you kind of have this chance to build in something longer term. Uh, so there's a lot of opportunity. It's not just what the kind of specific duties are. If you kind of feel this ambition or need for to build something, it's a good opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, Quick question. I know you talked about some of the initiatives that are underway. And so, what are some of those initiatives that kind of have been started that you see are going to be major things that you continue next year, and that the TIG as a leadership group will be kind of engaging? Obviously, I think one of the neat things about being a part of the TIG is the opportunity to create new things. But I know there's certain things that you shared already that you're currently doing that you see will probably be initiatives that continue on next year and into the future.
There's a few. So Naima pointed to um, this idea of a kind of a small business. We're calling it like a super small, like solopreneur style retreat. We need to come up with a really solidified name for it. But um, this is something that I've been honestly shocked by how much demand and interest there is in having some solopreneurs and kind of shop of one, like myself and Naaima, that's the case for us, to come together and have a retreat to talk about kind of business planning. And I think in some ways the conference itself is a fairly limited avenue to do that because there's only so much time we can spend with only so many slots we get for official sessions. Um, so that's something that we're hoping to do next year in the early parts of next year. That is something we'll pilot out and test it, and if it is successful, then we'll be able to continue that. Mastermind groups are something that has that's a TIG initiative from years ago now. That is something that we continue to do year over year. Something I've been thinking about for next year as well which is the unofficial TIG activity, is the last TIG survey that we did was in 2022. So we're about due for another TIG survey. And so Matt, that's something that I'm sure you've been thinking about as well. And so maybe potentially something like that. So there's a lot of potential recurring activities going on, and there's probably more I'm not remembering, frankly.
Uh,
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's helpful to also note that there are just continuing things that are not necessarily TIG board, spaces, but are continuous spaces like this one. Matt, obviously you're going to continue to do IC topic chats, and I believe Tasha is going to continue to do healing spaces. So and then we have metrics and mentors and other groups. So there are also just like recurring member initiated spaces. So that's just important to note as well. So let me go back to the presentation. Sorry, I stopped sharing because I was going to haywire with the buttons there for a minute. Here we go.
So at this point, we can stop trying to sell you on the leadership team. Hopefully, you're sold. But we wanted to preview a little bit of what to expect at the conference next month, for those of you that are able to attend. And I know this year is a very different year for different people, so we know there's varying attendance and everything. I don't know how much that's been discussed in the topic chats, but something we can discuss after this presentation as well. Um, so we have 5 sessions, not including our business meeting, but 5 sessions that we were able to accept. And I saw at least 2 of these folks are here today. So congratulations to those 2. And just to kind of show you some of the smattering of sessions. So we have Avengers Assemble, a panel discussion, strengthening evaluation through shared leadership by our very own Kurt. So look out for that. We're excited about that. Um, Another session, Breaking Barriers, Transforming the RFP and Contracting Processes, which is a think tank. The think tank is basically like a brainstorming session, like where we're trying to. It's not necessarily that they're going to come with all the answers. Like the people in the room are going to determine the answers. So that might be a really like constructive session for folks to reimagine what that RFP and contracting process looks like. Another session, which is a paper session, rooting resistance and structure, building a co-op evaluation practice in times of uncertainty. Um, Co-ops, something that gets brought up a lot in this space with evaluation consulting, and so being able to hear about what that process has been like lately for a group. So there's a lot of folks that are presenting part of that session. Really exciting. And then the Birds of a Feather session called No Niche. I don't know if that's the correct one. I was not paying attention in the chat. Independent evaluator, no problem. The benefits of a nicheless independent consulting practice by Christiana Martin. And if I mess up your names, I'm sorry. I'm doing my absolute best and trying to be confident with it rather than give a bunch of different options as to what it might be. So excited for that. I will probably be at that Birds of a Feather because I am very interested in that. Um, and then the last session, we have Empowering Community, a demonstration of participatory methods that reveal potential and facilitate enabling connections, by Julie K. Rajaratnam. And so that's a demonstration, very hands-on, or show people things, maybe even some interactive elements. So,
Yeah,
and
and then we
it's not a
just,
TIG event, but I'll be doing the pre-conference workshop on introduction to independent consulting if anybody's interested. It's on Tuesday, November 11th. It's a full day.
sorry for not highlighting that. When I went to the
No,
conference schedule,
it's not
just
listed as a
filtered it
TIG
by
event.
TIG. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, it doesn't get filtered by the TIG, so I wouldn't expect you to. Yeah, thanks.
Yes, did not mean to snub you. And we just found out literally an hour ago that when our business meetings will be, and I say meetings because we are having both a virtual and an in-person at the conference. I think just as a little heads up for you all, the really important one to attend is probably going to be the virtual. So if you're at the conference and you have to decide between this other TIG and the IC TIG if we're in the same slot, I think the more important one is going to be the virtual. We're going to have more of our leadership team available for the virtual conference or the virtual business meeting. Um, and then we'll have a table at the TIG fair if you want to learn more about the TIG, about leadership. This is still well within the nomination timeline for leadership. So if you want to learn more about that, I will be at the conference. And so feel free to come ask me any questions. Happy to talk about it and to see you all.
Yeah, I believe Tasha's going to be there as well. So
Yes.
you two will be our small and mighty representation from the leadership team. So we encourage folks to attend, to strengthen community, and to make evaluation friends. I feel like, Nathan, you recently shared that there were just a bunch of, conference related activities that are already filling up your calendar. And so I think this is a great opportunity for folks to network, for those, again, who have the ability and the opportunity to go in person. So that is our formal presentation, and we are now going to open it up to questions and discussion.
Okay, and I'll go ahead and stop the recording. I just want to say goodbye to everybody out there in the IC, to the YouTube land, and for those of you guys who are sticking around, please stick around.